But I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you and tell you just a little bit about themselves. And before we do that, I do want to say a special thank you to Sarah, because she was at an all-day workshop in Syracuse today and still came to share with us. So we really, really appreciate the fact that they are taking their time to help us become professionals as they are. So let's give them a very warm welcome. Okay, Sarah, let's start with you.
I'm Sarah Marcham, and I'm the K-5 literacy coach for Dryden Central Schools.
I'm Dana Bell. I'm a K-2 primary reading teacher and also the department chair K-12, and I work with a lot of professional development with Sarah.
I'm Kristen Jameson. I'm a literacy specialist over at Randall School in Cortland City, and I also teach Lit since '93.
I'm Belinda Pinkerton, and I'm a reading teacher at McGraw Elementary School. Pretty much K-5.
And we are delighted to have all of you. And in case you are not aware, all four of them are alumni of our program. So, woohoo! Get our little plug in there. Also, before we get started, I also need to say thank you to the Literacy Department for making this event possible, along with the School of Education and the Campus Artist and Lecture Series, because they help us to manage this each semester. So this semester we have elementary literacy specialists, as you heard. In the fall semester we have the secondary literacy specialists. So for those of you for whom this may be your first event, then you will have, it rotates each semester. So we'll have a different group in the fall. So let's get started by having you ladies share with us, you already told us about your job. So what do you actually do each day as part of your job? And we'll just go that from the outside in, so Sarah this way.
I spend a lot of time answering email, honestly. I usually have a meeting before the school day begins and after school ends, probably 3 to 4 out of 5 days a week. I attend a lot of committees, so I'm a member of quite a few committees having to do with ELA planning and data inquiry, and I meet with principals regularly, and so it's a lot of meetings and quite a lot of professional development planning and casual working with teachers collaboratively, but more actually observing teachers and trying to notice trends in the district. I also screen new students. So this year I've screened 75 incoming K-5 students, which helps with placement. That's all I can think of right now.
And out of those 75, she typically sends me half of them. Again, I work in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. So for kindergarten, I push into ELA time, and we work on a lot of phonemic awareness things. First grade and second grade is mainly pull-out, whether it's one-on-one or small group instruction. And I also try to push into the classrooms to help support writing, whether it be on certain days, like Fridays, or if the teacher has something going on, we work collaboratively together rather than pulling a group out. But I also do a lot of emailing and answering questions as well. Being the K-12 department chair, I still have to make sure that my colleagues up in the middle school and high school are informed and taken care of, as well as Dryden has 3 elementary buildings, so there's managing of that as well. A lot of collaboration. A lot of it happens on the fly with all the different classroom teachers that we work with, or rooms that we might be in where there's special education teachers. I swear I have a lot of meetings with our principal as well.
And we often
We often are
work
in those
together.
meetings together, so there's a lot of those meetings that happen. about professional development or placements or curriculum. Literacy, yeah. We run monthly literacy chats where teachers come in and there's kind of a topic that we're focusing on, and we run a professional development morning, along with every half-day professional development day, every superintendent's conference day.
She's tagged.
I'm tagged. That sounds like my day.
All right, not too busy,
No,
right?
no.
Completely manageable. Okay. Kristen, how about you?
My day is actually very similar. Usually in the mornings, at least 2 days a week, I've got meetings for RTI. We have a problem-solving team that I'm a member of. Then my mornings, we have intervention blocks. So I service the K intervention block. I do a 1-2 intervention block. And we also have a 3 through 6 combined that I do. I'm certified in reading recovery, so I do service reading recovery students. I also put in kindergarten. This year we're kind of doing a project where I'm doing more tier 1 with them. But in the past, pretty much my job changes year to year. But a lot of committees, professional development, you're the one running it. A lot of on the fly, taking students to and from rooms. But collaboration is key. There's a lot, especially with all of the Common Core stuff. There's lots of questions and people want answers, so that's your job.
McGraw is a much smaller district, and we have no literacy coach, we have no literacy specialist beyond, I'm a reading teacher, there's another reading teacher, that kind of a thing. I don't do a lot of emailing, I'm really teaching all day long with kids, which I'm happy for. I think if you move up, sometimes you end up in a situation where you're on committees a lot more. I'm actually working with children all day long. I either push into classrooms or I will pull students out for response to intervention, the RTI program. And you're usually assigned certain grades that you're going to work with. I happen to do kindergarten and 3rd grade, but I've just been given a couple 5th graders to work with now. So it can vary. And again, in a small district, they kind of grab you for when they need things. And that's what my job is, pretty much pull in, or push in, or pull out, depending on which class, which students and what day, that kind of a thing.
So you are popular. You're all popular. Do you feel like you're the most popular teacher in the school in terms of workload some days?
Depends on. There are some days. Yeah, there are some days.
You have your days.
Can I just ask a question too? Of how many students do you have, like we call it on the rosters?
I was just looking, I work with about 30,
Okay.
and that doesn't count the pushing and assisting in a general way with
Yeah.
classes if I do that.
So you have to do paperwork on those 30
Uh,
presumably?
Probably not, because some of those are just reading groups where I'm actually helping the teacher by doing reading groups and stuff. So I would probably say there's probably more like about 12 that I'm actually keeping regular logs on.
Oh, okay.
And some of the other ones are more reading group children.
So how many students do you each work with, say, in a day? Or how many are you totally responsible for as well? Because I understand that you might only see them a few days a week or 1 day a week or whatever. So first, how many would you see generally in a day? And then how many are you actually directly responsible for?
I probably come into contact with 45 students roughly a day. I keep paperwork though, as far as what we need to do for bi-weekly progress monitoring and parent contacts and reports and all that stuff on 12 students right now. A lot of the other stuff is just stuff that classroom teachers keep, and then we just kind of confer and collaborate with them.
I don't actually see students anymore, but when I was working at the intermediate level, now with the requirements of RTI, I'm not sure.
Some of it's RTI.
We would generally have at least 25 to 30 kids on our formal caseload in ELA, and then additional ones in math. And it has to do with the state test identifying students as needing support. That's, I think, why you see fewer at the grade levels. And you made a great point that I don't know if I really consider it moving up, but as you move into a literacy coach position, you really when they interviewed me, they said you need to be aware that you really won't work with children much anymore, and that's true, and it's hard. I mean, in some ways, it's a trade-off.
Yeah, in our district, when I started 6 years ago, we had 3 literacy coaches, and since then, all 3 have left to take other jobs too, because the budget cuts were coming, and they were nervous, and they took other jobs, and their jobs weren't filled. So even though I'm not technically a literacy coach, a lot of that stuff we have to divide between the elementaries. So like you said, how many kids are we responsible for? I'd have to say 323, because we track every kid in our building. Well, we track every kid in our building. So, I mean, that's the reading teachers that do that. And then on my caseload, I would say I probably in a day see about 30. So, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it was about a dozen, I think, that I have to keep regular records on and kind of be accountable. But I'm not the only teacher, obviously. I'm the person who helps them with their reading issues.
Okay, exciting job. Okay, so you've talked a little bit about differences in the job title. So for those of us who aren't really clear about the job title, I know that there are school districts which use the terms interchangeably, and they use reading teacher, literacy specialist, and literacy coach interchangeably. So what about in your individual contexts? How are those terms applied?
In my case, I'm actually, I think I've been called a reading, all of those terms. But I would say people in the school know me as a literacy coach. But the funding probably comes through Title I, and I'm just like any other reading teacher. I mean, you know, certification-wise, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the largest difference would be in most districts, literacy coaches, like Sarah pointed out, don't really work with kids anymore. Or what they're working with is teachers and staff. And I mean, obviously it always benefits the students, but she's got less teaching time with the students. And I think in our district, we mainly are just called, the rest of us are reading teachers, but we are literacy specialists because that's what our degrees are in. And like Sarah said, her degree is the same as mine, she just has a different title. And I think depending on your personality, you're more comfortable, you know, putting yourself out there for leading professional development and doing that stuff regardless of your certification. I think it's kind of your personality.
Kristen, how about you?
Well, I guess I look at the literacy coach used to kind of be the person that we would go, the reading department would go to. They kind of looked at more of the district, and then we were worried about more of what's going on in our buildings. So that's kind of the main difference. But like you said, it's all the same certification. It's just a lot of times, like the literacy coach is kind of that person you called it. Like, I am struggling. I really need help with this student. They would come in and do their, you know, give you some ideas, and then they check in periodically. So.
And because they don't have a literacy coach where we are, they come to me.
Yeah, right.
So I kind of have some of that same thing. I cringe when I hear literacy specialist. It's like I should have a cape or something, you know. I prefer reading teacher. That kind of makes me a little bit where I'm really at, I think.
That's in your comfort zone?
That's my comfort zone.
Okay. Okay, so one of our students would like to know if you work with advanced students as well as working with struggling students.
I don't. I guess I was just thinking that in talking about curriculum, I talk about curriculum with people fairly regularly, and it might come up, it hasn't recently, but it might come up that we would discuss what kind of strategies might we use to meet the needs of high-achieving students.
So you do the testing for it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I do screen the higher.
So that's the piggyback thing. Yeah.
They can tag team on this.
Well, Sarah will often assess the higher students just to kind of take out that subjectiveness and objectiveness part of, but I know that they can do it because kind of thing. So often if kids are going to be called above grade level, Sarah is the one that normally will assess them for the classroom teacher. I unfortunately don't have a lot where I work with advanced students. A lot of times, again, what I would end up doing is working with a classroom teacher for things that they could do, ways that they could push students beyond. With our assessment being the DRA, there's only so many levels students can move up before you kind of go into the next year's classroom teachers assessment tool. So a lot of times instead of pushing up level, we start to push the kids out. So what can they do going this way? Can they write more about things? Can they read different genres they've never read before? So that would typically be how I would work with a classroom teacher to kind of advance or work with advanced students.
I'm very similar actually. Don't work a ton with advanced students. However, I do push in to some rooms who have some students who are above, so I do support, but I don't directly work with them. It's more of collaborating with the teacher, giving them some extra ideas of things to do to challenge.
We don't have a gifted program at our school, and last year there was a concern. There were a few children that they felt they wanted to be challenged more, and so there was a little spot in my schedule from 8 o'clock in the morning till the bell rang, that kind of thing after attendance and everything. And we squeezed those kids in daily to have kind of like a program of that.
Some
It was kind of-
enrichment.
Right, enrichment kind of thing. I did some projects with them and things like that. We did some more logic problems and analogies and that kind of thing. So I've worked a little bit with that, but not usually. That was an unusual situation.
Okay, so do any of you happen to co-teach?
Yes. Some.
I did in the past, and I really loved it.
So what would that look like? If you were going to co-teach, what kind of model were you using for that?
If you're co-teaching, for me, I needed to be in on the planning level. So we would plan regularly, and that has become more of a problem for our teachers because there are so many kids who we're serving now that it's difficult to find collaboration time. But in the past, I used to work with teachers who I would plan with, and then we really shared the standing up in front of the class, and I love that. I mean, we would plan pulling books together for literature circles or whatever, and then we would also, for any writing assignments, we would share the grading and commenting on papers and working with kids on writing goals. And yeah, those are some of my best times in the classroom.
I think mainly the co-teaching happens for me at writing time. So whether I'm pushing into a first grade classroom and working with the students and the teacher during writing, or like at second grade where I push in on Fridays for writing support. So it could be the other teacher leading, it could be myself leading, I could be working with students that I typically see on a daily basis, or I could be working with any of the students in the classroom. So it is kind of nice. I mean, a true co-teaching, when you walk in, you shouldn't know what teacher is what. And so that's kind of the nice thing.
This year I'm co-teaching in kindergarten, so you are looked at. We do common planning. The kids look at you just as a regular teacher, not just like somebody who walks in. I am involved in their whole literacy block. Last year I did some fourth grade where I actually pushed in during social studies, but the goal was to integrate literacy into the content area. So I've done that. And then I've also done writing is one that we like to do some different co-teaching. But it's tricky because usually we don't have common planning time within the day, so it's before and after school. It's another meeting you have to go to. And it is a lot because you may spend an hour in a classroom and then you still have 7 other groups in that day. So it makes for a busy day.
You, I'm sure know, co-teaching takes all sorts of different forms. You've probably gotten that all through your studies already. And I definitely do co-teaching, but not always the same way. Sometimes it's 2 of us kind of playing off each other in a lesson. And another time it will be one teach, one assist. Another time it's parallel, where you'll be teaching the same thing to 2 different groups. or teaching it differently to one group that's kind of a struggling readers type. You'll work differently than the other teacher will work with those things. Sometimes it's one teacher and one is observing to see what's going on. So all those things that you hear about in theory really do happen in the schools. And I can't say enough about the idea of co-planning. Sadly, that is not happening anywhere near as much as I'd like it to. One of the questions that's coming up here is, what do you find difficult? If you don't have that co-planning time, you're walking in and just trying to, what am I going to do now? You're surprised for the day. You know, it's like, oh, we're working on verbs. Oh, we're working on this. I mean, you sometimes have a copy of the manual. Sometimes you don't have a copy of the manual in small rural schools. So you just a little bit of trying to catch up where you can, help where you can. There's so many better ways we could do it if we had more time. But you have a situation sometimes where certain teachers stay after school and you find you're more connected to those teachers you're working with, and other ones who have babysitting situations, they have to get their kids and stuff, they're pretty much out sooner, they'll do their work at home, but you don't have that time, and there's nothing built into the schedule that says this is our collaboration time. You don't always have a break the same time as they do. So I find that to be just, it was like the potential for co-teaching is fabulous. The reality of it is sometimes not as good because of that problem. So when it works really well. When it works, it's still better than not having it, but you know how much better it could be. But that's the reality. People can't stay late all the time.
Yeah.
So I find it really varies depending on the teacher you're working with, how much you can do that and how much you're going to get surprised when you walk in. Oh, today we're doing this. Okay, you know. So that's the reality. But I love it. I think it's a great way to teach. I think it's so good for kids, but it could be really good.
My frustration when I also was asked to help out in math classes, and if you don't have time to really understand what's going on, and you're just coming in cold, and you're just sort of circulating around, and I found that you ended up being sort of a policeman, which definitely wasn't why I went into teaching. So that was why, you know, I would do everything I could to try to co-plan with somebody and say, what do you really want me to do? I want to do something that will be helpful to kids, not just tell them, you know, let's stay on task.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, plus, co-planning is so valuable because I know I've worked with a lot of teachers, like especially the one, I was so nervous about pushing it to a social. I was like, social studies, I don't know, I haven't been in 4th grade in so many. But it was valuable because we kind of bring to the table ELA strategies and literacy strategies, and a lot of the classroom teachers, they're like your content specialists. So when you plan together, you come with more ideas and you can help support each other. So it's really valuable. The co-teaching can be a great thing.
Do you find that each of your schools is supportive of co-teaching? Like they will help to create opportunities for that? Or is that one of those things that you as an individual will seek out someone, or they will seek you out for co-teaching?
I think that teachers can make it happen. In our district, there are teachers, reading teachers, who make it happen regularly just by their nature, because they're friendly with a classroom teacher, or for whatever reason. They're deliberate, in our district, they're deliberately promoting co-teaching with special education and classroom teachers right now. And it's kind of something that goes in cycles, you know. Sometimes it's in and sometimes it's out, and sometimes there's funding and sometimes there's not, and not all classrooms get it. But I find that the special ed teachers who are doing it this year, I hear, are really happy with it, really, really happy. That's my impression.
I think it's harder, especially for the intermediate reading teachers who have a half an hour block. You know, this is the time, and there might be 2 or 3 reading teachers assigned to that classroom, so the possibilities of the co-teaching would be harder. And again, it's all schedule based, and that's one of the biggest problems that we have. So I think if there was a better way of being able to do it, we would, but right now, scheduling wise, it's just too hard.
I know in our building, my principal really does embrace co-teaching, and a lot of times it's data-driven. So if we look at patterns of data, and there's, you know, half the class isn't reading, then that's a kind of a class that I would go into and co-teach and support. So I don't really stay, I kind of bounce each year to a different grade where the need is.
Ours is supported, but it's basically through scheduling again. You know, you are given to somebody to be their support person. So in that sense, they're supporting it, but nobody has really been able to carve out that time for co-planning. So in that sense, I feel like there's a lack of support within the system. I don't want to blame anybody but the system, that we really don't have that set to be able to do anything different than we're doing.
Okay. Well, let's move on to a new topic, which is not a new topic for all of you. When we talk about assessment and all of the current changes with educational reform and the additional assessment, we had lots of questions about assessment. So let's look at some of those questions from some of you. First question, what types of assessments do you use when you're servicing a student? Any particular one that you tend to lean toward?
Me, on a daily basis, I still use running records. To me, they're the most informative and quick assessment that I can do on a daily basis with kids. We use DRE2 to get kind of their independent reading level and find their instructional level from there. As a RTI, it came down that we every 2 weeks have to progress monitor our kids. So every 2 weeks we're doing some sort of formative assessment as well, whether it be the running records, STAR. Within DRE2, there's word analysis that kind of is like a phonics, phonemic awareness, letter, sight word kind of thing. So we do that as well. I mean, those are mainly, those are mainly the formal ones that we work with. I know there's lots of them out there, and I mean, if you just Google the word assessment, forget about it. But those are the main ones that I use on a daily basis.
Do all of you know what formative assessments are? I see some nods. Are there any of you who are going, okay, just in case. Okay, formative assessments are those assessments that you do regularly on a regular basis, like the Fountas and Pinnell running records, etc., and they will inform your instruction. Summative assessments, on the other hand, occur at the end of a grading unit or teaching unit, or think of your standardized tests as being summative assessments. So think of a summary, an overview, okay, just to step in if you didn't know. Okay, so back over here, sorry, I apologize. Kristen?
In our building, or in our district, we use the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment, so we assess all kids twice a year on that. Running records daily, running records all the time. We also, in our school, we screen with Ames Web, and we do progress monitoring through Ames Web every week or bi-weekly, depending on the kids' tier. And then we have like like sight words and letters. I'm in kindergarten now, so it's like we assess all the time. A lot of the primaries have so many. It's like we're doing blends again, but there's quite a few like K2 that we have writing.
Yeah,
some
writing as well.
assessments like rubrics. So we assess a lot.
Yeah, we do assess a lot.
The younger they are, the more you assess.
Yeah,
Yes.
it seems like it, yeah. We have a regular kindergarten battery of tests that goes every report card period. So the kindergarten teachers are one-on-one checking things, and I'm helping out with some of that with phonemic awareness and all these kinds of things. So we'll take kids and we're doing that. So that's kind of almost, it's sort of formative in the sense that you know where you're going next, but it's also somewhat of a benchmark of did they achieve this, did they not achieve this. We also use Ames Web as a regular progress monitoring thing for our RTI students as a required thing. That's a computer thing. The kids just sit down and they're doing through the letters and giving the sounds, and you have a computer you're looking at and you're like marking yes or no and right or wrong and things. So we're watching that to see if they're growing. 3 times a year, they're also the whole school is benchmarked again for how are they doing on the Ames Web, so there's that kind of a thing. Running records, regularly sitting and listening to students read and keeping track of Where are they making the mistakes? How can I help them? What do we need to do next? That's more formative because it's forming the next thing you're going to do with them. And there's always the flashcards, and again, I'm going to give you these sounds, you write the letter that makes that sound, those kinds of things. So there's just a regular, ongoing checking to see, are they getting it, are they not getting it? You should always be doing that so you know whether or not you're barking up the wrong tree or you're in the good direction somehow. So some are required and some are ones that you just do because it's the better teaching way to do things.
So a lot of it is anecdotal as well, watching students.
Oh, yeah.
You're watching, seeing what they're doing, what their reaction is.
Yeah, we all keep notes, I think. I have sticky notes, and you're jotting things down and sticking it someplace, and later it goes into another file of information about that student. So regularly you want to do that.
Okay. Do any of you have like a favorite one? What's your favorite? We love assessments, right? So what is your favorite assessment? Or which one is perhaps more frequently used in your school?
I have a lot of confidence in the DRA myself. I think it gives us a common language to talk about students across the school, and it's invaluable if you are trying to express to parents or to students' support team or the Committee on Special Education, you're trying to describe how behind a kid is. That's, it's numerical, and in theory, it's understood by everybody. I have faith in it myself, so I guess I would have to say that one. We've been using it for about 6 or 7 years now, and that's like an eternity in education. Very few things last more than about 3 years, so, yeah.
Right, good.
I think honestly mine is running records, so that's where I can see what a kid is doing, whether it's a book that we've just instructed on the day before, so it's only the second time they've seen them, or they've seen it a couple times and now I want to be listening more. Are they fluently reading through, or are they stopping, are they struggling? Running records to me are the most informative that I use on a daily basis.
I agree. Running records are huge, but I have to say I'm big into the fountain now, just because that's like what I was trained in. But I'm really big on, I use the continuum of literacy learning for a ton of my instruction. So I like the Fountain benchmark because it breaks it down into the different components. So let's say a kid only gets 1 out of 3 on about text, then I could go in and find goals for that and connect everything together. So personally, that's just how I was taught and what I enjoy. That's my favorite.
I think they have their merits in all different ways. Obviously, the DRA is wonderful because you do come up with a number. If you have a book room full of numbered books based on levels, you have some place to start with where you're going to pull things from, which is wonderful. And you can see progress as they go from number to number and they're increasing. And you can, because you're doing a running record to do a DRA, you kind of get the benefit of that also. But it's also just a one-on-one situation. Any kind of one-on-one is always better in assessment than having to do a full-out test for everybody, because to watch somebody working through something is just so valuable. But that's what's hard sometimes, because we don't always have the time. We want to do everybody regularly, that often. So running records and DRAs are very helpful. But just the flashcards and stuff, if that's what you're working on, obviously that's something that you're watching the increase that way too. And that's also nice because you can share that with students. Sometimes we're a little reluctant to start saying you're a level 16 or you're a level 18 on your reading, lest they go around, I'm a 16, I'm an 18. But with flashcards, they can sort of see the piles getting bigger that they know, and it's not really quite the same as a number that stamps them. So you can share that kind of growth with students, which is very motivating. Whereas I think the other one you have to kind of just keep for us, that we're, doing our own, keeping track of how they're growing. So.
Okay, good. All right, so another question is, how many different forms of assessment do you typically use with one student?
Well, if you count, the New York State tests and the tests that the classroom teacher might be doing, and if it's a struggling student, the sad thing is that you're assessing them more. I don't know, in our district it's probably 6, 8, somewhere in there. And a lot of this has changed a great deal in the last 4 years or so since RTI really got going. So things are quite different than they were about 5 years ago. And personally, I'm not so sure we need quite as much data as we're collecting. It's a lot to take in.
Plus it takes time to collect it. If I look at, one of the hard things we're experiencing right now is, we have to test every kid with the constant hour, like it takes, half hour to 45 minutes per kid. We have 300, we do teams to help with that, but you're out of the classroom a lot. And then when we do our screening teams, you're a member of that, so you're out for that. So it's tough because assessment is just, and then when you finally get back into your classroom, like, oh, it's Friday, I got a progress monitor. Like, we're going to assess some more. But,
I see the kindergarten teachers, again, having to give up a couple days in a row to do the math and all the ELA stuff that they're trying to assess for the report cards. And so that just takes away teaching time totally for that kind of thing. So that's hard to watch. And then, like you said, when there's benchmarking for the entire school, where you're going to put every kid through a one-on-one type thing like Ameswell or something, or a DRA for everybody across, you have what they call a SWAT team. Everybody who's the reading teachers and the special ed teachers, and people who are sort of trained on that, all descend on classrooms and basically start pulling kids out, doing that whole class, and then goes back and then goes to another class and feeds on that class and does one, which is better for the classroom because it's all done and over with, but you're losing all your support people, all your reading, your speech, your special ed people are all pulled out of their work for a couple days to do this SWAT team benchmarking. So assessment takes a huge amount of time out of your instructional time. So I think teachers all feel like that's frustrating. Yeah, to watch that happen.
So how do you decide which assessments to use with a child? Do you just have a battery that you use for every child, or do you differentiate to a certain extent?
With me, there are certain ones that we do with every child. STAR testing every child in the district, have it DRA2 every child